Hello and welcome to the CUFI UK podcast for Zion's sake. My name is Alastair, this is Alex.
Hello.
And in today's podcast, we discuss a possible hostage deal between Israel and Hamas.
That's right. We're also looking at a change at the International Court of Justice, which could be positive for Israel as it defends itself from false accusations of genocide.
That's right, and possibly an answer to prayer as well. Plus, we discuss a planned pro-Palestinian protest that is set to take place this weekend near a synagogue, defying police orders, and why 29 MPs are complicit in this intimidation.
So, Alastair, I think we should start off by talking about the hostage negotiations or hostage deal that could be on the table. Obviously, this has been spoken about for many months now, since the last time that Israeli hostages were released back in November 2023. That was the last time that any Israeli hostage was released. Obviously, there's been Israel IDF have recovered bodies of hostages. They've actually freed hostages alive over that period of time, but actually Hamas has not released any hostages since then. But right now, for the first time in a long time, it looks like there is a credible deal on the table and negotiations are taking place. And hopefully, we will be seeing live hostages released by Hamas after what has been around 15 months of captivity.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, as I say, as we're doing this podcast, at this moment in time, it is unknown whether or not a hostage deal has definitely been agreed or not. There's lots of rumors going around.
Yeah.
But look, this is a critical stage, really, in the hopes for hostages to be released, and we need to pray that all of the hostages will be released.
Yeah.
We need to pray for wisdom for Israel's leaders. I know Pastor Hagee put out a video yesterday. He said we need to pray for the wisdom of Solomon for Israel's leaders. And let us pray that all of the remaining hostages are released. In terms of what's on the table, it looks as though there is going to be a phased process. So the first phase, which apparently would last 60 days, 33 hostages would be set free. These would be in the category of what's, quote, humanitarian cases, so include women, children, men over 50, and those who are sick. They would be released first, and that would be in exchange for as many as 1,300 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Some of those prisoners are terrorists. And the second and third stages would actually begin on the 16th day of the ceasefire. So those talks would be regarding the release of male soldiers, younger male civilians, and the bodies of deceased hostages would be returned. And so that's further down the line, and I'm guessing that will be largely dependent on how successful a ceasefire is, whether or not it holds, whether or not Hamas keeps to the terms of a said agreement. Now, of course, I mean, I think one thing to acknowledge is the fact that the Palestinians are receiving a disproportionate number of prisoners in return for Israelis, who are, by the way, not prisoners, they are hostages. It's not a like for like in any way or any sense. But of course, that is a lot of Palestinian prisoners and terrorists. Of course, a ceasefire also means that Israel would have to cease its military operations. So you can see that this opens the doorway of a lot of political opinion in terms of what should happen. But I think our focus really and our prayers need to be geared towards the protection and security of Israel and the release of all Israeli hostages.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this war would have been over. Well, it would never have happened if Hamas didn't start it and actually take hostages, but it would have been over a lot sooner if Hamas just released the hostages. But obviously, they are a bargaining chip for Hamas. Hamas, is willing to sacrifice its own people, so it has no care in the world for Israelis. But obviously, Israel is doing everything it can. I think it shows the humanity of Israel as well, where they're willing to give so many, criminals, who are in their prisons, and some of them are violent terrorists who have murdered Jews. They're willing to give those people back to the Palestinians in order to get their people back. And bearing in mind, the youngest Israeli hostage who is in Gaza is Kafir Bibas, who was 9 months old when he was abducted, and he has celebrated his first two birthdays in captivity in Gaza. So hopefully, obviously you said about the women and children being the first ones. I think there's only 2 children left, the 2 Bibas brothers, and they are the 2 youngest there. Yes. So hopefully if that is the case, if they are on the list and will be returned, that is a massive answer to prayer, obviously. Yes. But yeah, we have to be praying about these things because, this is something, I mean, just so people know, we do pre-record the podcast. So right now, as it stands, there is not a deal. Israeli officials expect a deal to be signed within the next few days. Yes. But at the moment, it is not the case. Netanyahu's office has just come out in the last few minutes saying that Hamas has not given the green light yet to a hostage deal. So there's which is contrary to the reports in the UK media yesterday and overnight, which was saying that Hamas has now agreed and it's Israel stalling. I think we need to acknowledge the fact that, look, Hamas cannot be trusted. That's why, that they are fickle negotiators. And I think Israel will have to tread very carefully to make sure that, Hamas does commit, but without having to compromise in any way. So it's a very, very difficult, they really do need wisdom. Yeah, exactly. And you have to remember as well, with this political side of things, it's like Israel's not just negotiating one-on-one with Hamas. Yeah. They've got political pressures on them. Hamas has its allies who are pressuring Israel's ally. Like, there's a lot of it's a lot more complicated than we think it is. It's not just those 2 in a room going, okay, yeah, we agree and done. Yes. And actually, I think it is worth mentioning that I think this is coming about likely because of the Trump effect. Well, I was just going to say, the inauguration next week does seem a little bit like, or for me as someone from the United Kingdom, it feels as though reading the news media, there were currently 2 presidents in office. And I don't think we should underestimate the impact and influence that President-elect Trump is having already in this negotiation process. Yeah, exactly. I think the Trump effect is in full effect. It is strange because obviously in the UK we're used to a politician sort of being elected and being the prime minister straight away. That's like, it's like next morning, it's like pat the bag, get the removal van. Yeah, like literally the removal van turns up, doesn't it, on the morning after the election, out they go. Yeah, whereas I think in America, obviously the same. Different. Perhaps if you were listening to this and you're from America, maybe you can explain that process, because we were talking about it and we were wondering why is that the case? Is it a tradition? Is it to allow time for the president to be able to cross to the other side of America back in the olden days or something like that? I mean, what is that? So if you know the answer to that, there is always Google, I suppose, but but let us know. Yeah, we are researchers. We should know this. Yes. Yeah. But it's very, very interesting that you should say that. And of course, President Trump has said, this has to happen before I come to the Oval Office, or else. Exactly. Which was a message, I think, directed more to Hamas, of course. But yes, we need to continue to pray for that. I also did want to just shed a little bit more information on the negotiations, because it says that here that the 3-part proposal would begin with a 6-week ceasefire and the release of some hostages. During the first phase,
which would last 60 days, 33 hostages would be set free. So that implies that it will be a gradual release of hostages, like what we saw in November.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just going to happen on day one. 33 hostages are released. That's not the impression I get. But as you say, we're not. It would be great to be a fly on the wall, but we're not a fly on the wall in that situation, and we will find out, and we will know. And it could, of course, also collapse. These talks could collapse, but let's continue to uphold Israel in our prayers. We were talking in the last podcast, Alex, about our hopes and concerns for 2025. One of the hopes we raised was for the immediate release of all of the hostages. And here we are a week later. We're probably as close as we've ever been since November 2 years ago. November 2023. To having some of the hostages released as part of a negotiation. So yes, let's continue to pray.
Definitely. Yeah, well, there's lots of things obviously we've been praying about over many different issues. Obviously, Israel's under attack from all aspects, it seems. And one of the attacks against Israel is in the international courts, which are being wielded against Israel in terrible fashion. Obviously, the two courts we're talking about are the ICC and the ICJ. The ICC is the International Criminal Court. The ICJ is the International Court of Justice. I won't explain everything about them, but
can you just explain, though, regarding why those two entities particularly are against Israel, how they are against Israel in different contexts? Yeah,
so the ICC has an anti-Israel judge at the top of it who is using his power to try and convict Israeli politicians and get them arrested and stop them being able to travel, hindering their ability to meet with allies and so forth. So the ICC is based on trying to try war criminals and get individuals arrested, that sort of thing. And so it's unfairly going against Israeli officials trying to try them for war crimes. The ICJ is where states can dispute matters against each other. The ICJ is part of the United Nations, and it's the way that the 193 nations of the UN settle disputes. So at the moment, there is a court case which is headed up by South Africa, and now, as you were saying last week, joined by Ireland as well.
Right. Yes.
So the Irish and the South African governments are putting a court case against Israel, trying to get them
accused of convicted of genocide, but trying to change the definition, as we learned last week, of genocide in order to convict Israel of genocide. So if you can't win,
change the rules.
A conviction, change the definition. That's what it would seem. So so the ICJ then, they are the entity which has to make a ruling on this, and significantly, this week. You're going to break the news.
You
to
can
the
break the
news,
news.
or shall I break the rules? Break the rules. Break the news. Well, we have been praying about this situation, and we need to believe that. We do believe the truth, which is God answers prayer. Right. This week, in fact, just as we were about to go on air on this podcast, there was a tweet issued confirming rumors earlier in the week to say that the president of the ICJ has resigned.
That's right.
He's resigned. He's resigned in pursuit of a lucrative job, I have to say, of being leader of Lebanon. I mean, who wouldn't turn that down, right? But anyway, he has pursued that. That's what he's aiming for. His name is Nawaf Salam. He has presided over these months of allegations against Israel, and I mean, we've kind of made some assumptions that he is anti-Israel by not standing up to it, right? But either way, it needs someone in leadership that is going to stand up against this sort of thing.
Definitely. And I would say, actually, he probably did push it forward because he was the president. He gets to decide which cases go forward and don't go forward. So obviously,
absolutely. And so the front runner to replace him as president of the ICJ is someone that is already a judge in the ICJ. Her name is Julia Sebutinde, she's actually the first African female ICJ judge,
Mm-hmm.
and she is from Uganda, and she was the only judge in the proceedings against Israel that came against this motion of allegations against Israel.
Yeah,
The only judge.
exactly.
And she's the front runner to become president.
That's right, yeah. So right now she's the vice president of the ICJ, so it makes sense that she would be the front runner there.
Yeah.
And like you said, there were 17 other judges who were on the panel for the court case against Israel. All of them voted in favor of the motions except for her, the one person who voted against it. She, as a result of this, there's been a lot of racism against her, especially in the Arab world. Unfortunately, there were, articles written by Al Jazeera and other newspapers sort of saying, who is this woman who was the only judge to vote against, etc. And she was even rebuked by her own country. So Uganda's ambassador to the UN said, Justice Sebutinde's ruling at the International Court of Justice does not represent the government of Uganda's position on the situation in Palestine. And he even pointed out some other things that she's voted on in favour of, which the Uganda government's been against and so forth. And they were trying to save face because Uganda was getting a lot of heat from this because obviously she's from Uganda. But ultimately, these judges are independent of the government. They might be sort of put forward by the government, but they're independent. Yes. They have to act independently, obviously, because it is not a political situation. It's a legal one. And actually, that is her case against why she voted against all of these things, because she's saying that what South Africa is doing is they're trying to push politics into the legal system. She's saying this is a political attack on Israel by lots of different countries, and she's against it because it doesn't have any legal merit. And we've obviously been saying that for a long time.
Yes.
The accusations against Israel, the fact they have to change the definition of genocide in order to accuse Israel of genocide means that it isn't about law anymore. It's about them trying to attack Israel.
Yes. So I mean, this is incredible. The fact that we've been talking about this for months, wondering, how this can be remedied, and here we have the president stepping down and a front runner, who is sympathetic towards Israel's case, who is who could become the next president. We need to pray
definitely
for Justice Julia Sebutinde that she will become head of the ICJ, and pray that she will be able to. Look, it takes just what we say this all the time: one person, one individual to stand up, for truth. Just one person could make all the difference.
Exactly.
And maybe she has been called, for such a time as this. So we need to pray for her. We need to pray that she will stand by, her conviction and standing by the law, right?
Obviously,
because she's pointed out herself that this is a legal issue, not a political one. But we thought we would share that news because we're often talking about it, and let's pray and believe that this could be an important step towards these false allegations being dropped against Israel.
Definitely. And I think this as well, I mean, we haven't spoken about the other side, which is the ICC. Obviously, I think America has, the House of Representatives has passed a motion to sanction the head of the ICC because obviously he doesn't have any legal jurisdiction over Israel, and yet he's issued arrest warrants and so forth. And obviously America has to defend that because they are not members of the ICC, just as other countries like Russia, China, and so forth are not members of the ICC. And if an Israeli politician is convicted, it means the ICC can do that to Americans. It can do that, and actually, the ICC's legal sort of parameters stop it from doing that, but it's doing it anyway. And I think again, this is a political move by the head of the ICC. Karim Khan is his name. He's a UK appointed judge, so our government appointed him as judge. It was actually under the previous government, under the Conservatives, that he was appointed. But again, he is in power until 2030. And so there's obviously a long time, unless obviously he steps down or if these sanctions work. I think on the flip side of that, looking at the the ICJ judge who has just stepped down, who is Nawaf Salam, who you mentioned earlier, just pointing out he was appointed last year on February 4th, 2024, and he was meant to preside over the ICJ until 2027. And obviously he's a Lebanese judge. He was previously Lebanon's ambassador and permanent representative to the UN. People watching this probably know, but Lebanon has obviously been at war with Israel recently with Hezbollah. I was actually just thinking this when you were speaking. Maybe there's a conspiracy here where, obviously Israel went to war with Lebanon, went to war against Hezbollah. They've obviously had a change of government and things have been destabilized there. And so maybe they did that so that he would be enticed to become the president.
Oh, wow, Alex. I tell you, that's the first ever conspiracy theory I've ever heard from you.
Yeah.
But
obviously that's just a joke.
That is that is a joke. Or maybe he's pro-Israel.
Oh, wow. And now Israel's managed to put him in power and they've got an ally in Lebanon. Yeah, you never know.
Anyway, back to this.
Back to reality.
Back to reality.
Yes. So we don't know the full situation there, but there is now hope because the ICJ has been used to attack Israel just as the ICC is being used to attack Israel. And maybe if there is someone, we're not necessarily sure if she's extremely pro-Israel, obviously, to stand up against your own government, to stand up against the flow of hatred towards Israel does show some aspect of being pro-Israel. And she is obviously under immense pressure, being racially abused and politically attacked and all the rest of it. So hopefully if Julia Sebutinde does become the president of the ICJ, I think that could be a positive for Israel. So we definitely need to pray
absolutely
for that. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, speaking about standing with the truth, shall we mention the Torch magazine?
Yeah, definitely.
Before we move on to our next topic.
Yep.
The Torch magazine is our regular magazine. It is absolutely free to download from online by going to www.cufi.org.uk/torch. There's also an option to receive it in the post physically if you live in the United Kingdom. So our latest Torch magazine is headed The Attack on Covenants, which is one of the articles which talks about how the covenants in the Bible are under spiritual attack in the days in which we're living. And as most of the covenants in the Bible are related to Israel and the Jewish people, we highlight what that means in the present day by how replacement theology is particularly undermining the truth about God's plans and purposes, past, present, and future for Israel. We explain what those covenants are. We explain how they're being undermined and how we can counter that practically in getting the right biblical theology in our understanding about Israel. So we hope that article and all of the others are helpful for readers. Because we produce this magazine, don't we, Alex, to equip people with the truth and
definitely
to be able to give encouragement and inspiration. And Torch magazine is an important resource that we produce and make available. So please do get the latest issue by going to that link that I shared. And yes, these are absolutely free of charge. I must just remind, though, that, of course, the work of CUFI has to be sustained through the generosity of supporters like yourself. So if you would like to make a donation towards the work of CUFI, then please do go to www.cufi.org.uk/donate, because all gifts go towards enabling us to produce more resources like the Torch, our campaigns, and the other things that we are doing. Also, if you are part of a church or other gathering of Christians, then we would very happily send more than one copy. It's good also to be able to send them your friends and family ones individually as well, so that they get them every time we produce a new issue. But if you would like to distribute them by hand to your friends and family, we'd be more than happy to send you some copies.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had people contact us saying they found the magazine in a dentist office and things like that. So some of our supporters obviously go around. We don't do it ourselves, but supporters put it into different places, and we've had to new support from that. So if you do want to leave it in your dentist office, then you might want to ask permission first, but you can feel free to do that as well, because it's all about getting the truth out there, and we want as many people to read it as possible, which is why it is free. It's free online to everybody, and it's free to receive by post if you are in the UK.
That's right. Just to add to that story, this was actually a supporter who found the Torch magazine in a dentist's waiting room and reported back to us that they were really blessed because they didn't know about CUFI until they picked up the magazine.
Yeah.
And it actually brought them a peace and comfort in what was probably quite an anxious appointment for them.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show, doesn't it? You don't know what impact you're having. But as you say, also an important place to perhaps leave them with permission is the back of a church as well.
Definitely.
Because we need to get the truth about Israel into the churches of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And we particularly also need leaders in churches in Great Britain to make a stand for Israel, but when I say preach Israel, do you know what I mean? I mean like speak Israel from the pulpit, align with God's word, and to be able to proclaim God's goodness and love for Israel and the Jewish people. We are so thankful that there are so many pastors and other church leaders that are doing so throughout the United Kingdom. But I think we have to acknowledge that there is such a need.
Yeah.
And there has been I would say almost like a vacuum which has been filled by false theology, false teaching in Israel. And it has had a detrimental effect on the spiritual climate of this nation, I think.
Yeah.
And we want to counter that. And we know that there are many faithful leaders who are. So perhaps your church leader needs to get it right regarding Israel and would benefit from this and our other resources. Or perhaps your church leader needs some, perhaps would be blessed by some encouragement in their stand. Just to say to them, thank you for standing with Israel. Have you heard a bit about CUFI? Can I give you one of these magazines? And that might encourage them and strengthen them and embolden them.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yes, thank you very much for all of our supporters for standing with us and helping us to get the word out.
Yep.
Shall we continue now on to the next topic?
Yep.
And closer to home, in the United Kingdom, there is a protest taking place this Saturday. It is a pro-Palestinian protest. It is billed as being quite a significant march, which is led by one of the leading Muslim pro-Palestinian groups.
Yeah.
And it is set to take a route which ends at the BBC studios. Of course, with the BBC being so pro-Israel, tongue in cheek. But anyway, the seriousness of this particular march is that it is going to be taking a route that is in very close proximity to a number of Jewish synagogues in central London, one particularly large Jewish synagogue which is close to the BBC studios. And the Jewish community groups have voiced their great concern about what that means regarding the synagogue, and also to worshippers who on Saturday, the Sabbath, will be in attendance at the synagogue. So there has been various actions taken place by those Jewish community groups, not to ban the march, but to prevent it from taking the intended route.
Yeah.
As a result of that, the Metropolitan Police have imposed a restriction preventing the march from basically taking its route and ending at the BBC offices, the BBC studio. Now, two things. First of all, the leader of this this Islamic leader of this particular march, has said that he will defy the police orders and has called upon thousands to join him in defying the order. Secondly, 26 MPs, yes, 26 members of parliament who represent you and me, have basically signed a parliamentary motion. Okay, that is something which gets tabled in parliament to overrule the Metropolitan Police's decision to impose this restriction. 26 members of parliament, 16 of them I believe to be members of the Labour Party. 29 MPs.
29 MPs, okay.
29, sorry. What do we think about this then, Alex?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things about this. When it comes to, obviously, the right to protest is a big thing. Some of these MPs might be saying, well, we need to allow them to protest. But ultimately, these are, this is an anti-Israel campaign. There is a lot of anti-Semitism on the streets of London as it is. When there are these marches, there are increased anti-Semitic incidents.
Yes.
The synagogue in question is one that has seen its attendance fall dramatically because of Jews being fearful, and the actual Jewish community in that area is fearful to go to synagogue on the Sabbath, which is when this march will take place. It's a holy day for Jews. And when it comes to the protection, like first and foremost, protection of citizens and especially marginalized groups such as the Jewish community, that is at the forefront of the police's mind. They are making decisions like this not because of politics or not because of trying to cut down free speech, but actually to protect the lives of the Jewish community or to protect the safety of the Jewish community.
Well, absolutely, because let's face it. You started saying that of the right to protest and everything. The 29 MPs are probably thinking about that. This isn't a ban on the protest.
And there has been false information because even Owen Jones, who is a quote unquote, a journalist, whereas actually I think he's an anti-Israel activist, he has come out saying he's basically making statements like the police have banned this march. He's also, just so you know, the reason why the BBC is under fire is because we obviously see the BBC as not very pro-Israel. Well, the anti-Israel lobby see the BBC as not very pro-Palestinian.
Yes.
And the way the Palestinian lobby works is it doesn't matter if you're slightly pro one thing or another. They basically will go against you even if there's a hint of bias or a hint of not saying what you want them to say, sort of thing.
Yes, and also there's a lot of, we joked about conspiracy theories earlier, but there's serious, genuine anti-Semitic conspiracy theories which are leveled against the BBC because of, quote, Jews in the media, etc., which is also part of their mindset in targeting institutions like the BBC. But I was just going to say that we have been calling for the police to do more. Most MPs would agree that the Metropolitan Police should have the powers to be able to police. Right? And yet here in this instance, these members of parliament are contending that the police should not have the powers to police. So do we want the police to have the powers or not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with this, for a long time we've been seeing it. Like, there's been open support for Hamas on the streets of London, which is a criminal offence in the UK, and police have not acted. They've not arrested the pro-Hamas protesters. In fact, they've arrested people who have held up signs saying Hamas is a terrorist group. So the police have been doing the opposite of what we expect. On this occasion, they seem to be doing the right thing of trying to stop this. At the same time, I still think we're going to see open support for Hamas in that group. I still think, actually, whether it's 5%, 10%, 50%, whatever it is of that crowd, there are a number of people at that protest who will be supporting the actions of Hamas. They will be Hamas supporters. So there is no, in my opinion, that's not a legitimate protest. Supporting a terrorist organisation is not something that is allowed here in the UK.
I know.
And so these politicians who are putting there, and do you want to mention some of the names? We do have
names, Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn,
Yep.
John McDonnell.
Yep. Dawn Butler.
Dawn Butler, who is apparently she is tipped to become or rumoured of hoping to succeed Sadiq Khan.
Yeah,
as the mayor of London.
Mayor. Yeah, so and these are all people who were part of Jeremy Corbyn's cabinet, shadow cabinet, and they are all people who are activists for the Palestinian cause.
Yes,
but
there's another 20. I know those are known names.
Yeah, known names. Yeah,
there's another 25.
Yeah, exactly. And
who are they? Let's call them out.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing. I don't actually have a list of all of them. I think there's.
No, I was talking rhetorically.
I
was.
But I'm just saying, like,
we do need to call them out.
I would name them all.
Who they are.
But this is the thing. It's like this is why it's so important we stand up for the Jewish people, because when it comes to the anti-Israel sort of sentiment there is, they don't differentiate necessarily between whether you're Jewish or whether you're Israeli. And there's a lot of times where there's been like anti-Semitic graffiti on Jewish restaurants. There's been obviously attacks against synagogues, graffiti, so forth. And actually there's been cases where Jewish people have been trying to walk down the street when one of these protests are going on, and police have warned them they will be arrested if they go near them, or said to them, we cannot protect you if you go near this protest. Because ultimately, Jews are in danger when there is a pro-Palestinian protest. Yes. Why? Because a lot of pro-Palestinian sentiment is actually anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas, pro-terror.
Yes.
And it puts people's lives, it puts people's safety at risk. Yes. And especially the Jewish community.
Yes. And will they still be calling for an intifada on Saturday if a deal was struck before then? Yes, they will be.
Of course. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, these protesters were calling Israel's actions against Gaza genocide about 20 years ago. Even before Gaza was, there's reports of like, Mahmoud Abbas and other, prominent Palestinians who have been accusing Israel of genocide and other war crimes for literally decades. And so these people, they're not about finding peace in the Middle East. They're not about justice for the Palestinians. They're about ridding the world of Israel.
Yes.
That is all they want. They want to get rid of Israel. And unfortunately, we've got 27 members of parliament. 29, sorry. 29 members of parliament who seem to, in my opinion, they align with that cause. They align with, you can try and say it's about the right to protest or anything like that, which, by the way, I'm a strong advocate for. I'm a strong advocate for freedom of speech. But in this case, I think it is, right for the police to protect the Jewish community. And you're saying as well about the conspiracy theories, anti-Jewish conspiracy theories. A lot of this actually stems from, with the anti-BBC rhetoric they've got, is there's a BBC editor, the Middle East editor is actually Jewish, and he wrote a book about the Red Sea operation that took place where Israeli spies set up
was it a diving school?
Diving school, and they used it to actually rescue Jews from, can't remember where it's from now, from Egypt or something like that. But anyway, he wrote that book. Netanyahu read that book, and he's got it apparently on his library. And that is the thing they see as, this is someone who's pro-Israel and he's controlling the narrative. His only mission is to stop the BBC reporting the truth about Israel. And this editor has actually been, his name is Rafi Berg, he's actually been receiving a flood of abuse since Owen Jones wrote that article.
Right.
So Owen Jones made up lies, smeared this man to the point where he's now receiving death threats and has to have security. And Owen Jones is the same person who is saying the police cancelled the protest, and this is, basically he's whipping up conspiracy theories and hatred against the Jews, saying the Jews control not only, they control the police, they control the media, and it's like, that's the sort of thing which these anti-Semitic protesters are getting whipped up for. And this is, people like Owen Jones need to be really careful in what they're saying, but he knows what he's doing.
Yes.
He knows he is, spreading the hatred and spreading the lies because he wants to see the end of Israel. And, I think it's just a tragic situation we've got where 29 MPs, there's 650 MPs. I don't know what percentage 29 is of 650, but say 5% of MPs are actually, willing to, put the Jewish community in London's safety and even the feeling of safety, even if they're not going to be attacked, actually the intimidation factor of it.
Yes.
And again, just to reiterate, the march was not banned.
No.
It has just been moved to a different place. Its route
its route has been restricted.
Yeah.
In the sense that the wishes of the Jewish community groups have been honoured.
Yeah.
And in a climate where anti-Semitism is on the rise, and we know the feeling shows that anti-Semitism on the rise, the news shows it, and the statistics give evidence that it is.
Yeah.
I think it is absolutely right
that
the Met Police have done this. Jewish community groups have come out in support for the Met Police's decision. Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has said that that the Met has the full support of the Jewish community for, quote, finally drawing a line in the sand. And I think that's important. Finally it has. Because months and months there have been these pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protests, and now something is done to try and restrain it in order to try and keep the Jewish community retain that sense of security. And look, it has caused national headlines because the organisers of the protests, some of those who are pro-Palestinian in the media, like Owen Jones, and even 29 of our MPs, have kicked up a fuss just because the route has changed.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Isn't that a sad reflection?
Yeah.
And almost highlights the well, let's call it for what it is, an anti-Semitic spirit, which is set there.
I know. Yeah, these are anti-Semites who are wanting to intimidate the Jewish community, and because they're being stopped, they're going to do everything they can.
Yes.
It is anti-Semitic. Like, we've obviously called Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitic in the past, or at least I think his actions prove that, and his support for terrorists do. We have to call them what they are. They're anti-Semites. This is an anti-Semitic hate march that should not be taking place near the Jewish community.
Yes. So we must pray for the Jewish community this weekend. Pray for the safety and security. Pray that the Met Police will stand its ground. And also pray that the Met Police will arrest and prosecute anyone who either shouts anti-Semitic slurs in the protest, supports Hamas, supports the Houthis, supports Intifada, calls for the Jewish people to be wiped out, all that sort of rhetoric. Let's pray that they will stand firm and will prosecute where necessary. And we don't want to even give all attention to this protest. Let's just pray that it will really be, that the thousands that they are calling for will not turn up. But most importantly, to pray for the safety and security of the Jewish people. And our heart is that anti-Semitism is countered. And one of the ways of doing that is to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish community. We're doing that here at CUFI. We appreciate your help. We appreciate your solidarity with CUFI in standing with us in this cause. And so thank you very much for doing that. Please look at the link in the description below if you would like to become a partner with CUFI. All support is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, please like this podcast, whether you're watching it on YouTube or on Spotify or on any of the other platforms that this podcast is on. Please also leave your comments. Let us know what you think about any of the stories that we have commented on today. Also, please share with your friends and hit the subscribe button as well, because by hitting the subscribe button, you will get notifications when the next podcast becomes available. Next time, there will be a new president in the White House. There will also maybe be a hostage deal that has been struck. Or maybe not. We don't know. but we must pray in faith that all those hostages will be released. Will you stand with us here at CUFI in that cause? Will you stand with us as we speak out for Zion's sake? Will you stand with us as we pray for the peace of Jerusalem? Thank you very much for listening and watching to this podcast. May the Lord be with you and bless you. Until next time, from me and Alex, goodbye.